Hello, and here I am at Imagine Books in Weymouth again, and I'm talking to...
I'm Colin Beveridge. I'm the author of Basic Maths for Dummies and several other for Dummies maths books.
And you're here today, you've just done a talk on the mathematics of Alice in Wonderland.
That's right, yeah.
Can you sort of explain?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ideas about what Alice in Wonderland's about, and one of the most compelling for me is that it's a protest novel about some of the new maths that was coming to the fore in the 1850s and 60s.
Right.
Things like non-Euclidean geometry and quaternions that you probably don't care about, but were really important for the development of computer science and for modern physics.
Yeah, and the Reverend Dodgson Lewis Carroll was a mathematician himself.
That's right, yeah, and he was a very small c conservative mathematician. He was he grew up with the elements of Euclid and didn't want to take it any further than those 2,000-year-old books.
Right.
And so when people were coming along saying, well, what happens if we change this thing in Euclid, he was really quite upset by that. And it turns out that when you change those things, you get quite exciting new maths.
And I guess he got annoyed about it because it changed his paradigm. It was outside.
Yeah, he was just uncomfortable with the change, and it was the quaternions in particular were quite threatening to him. He was an expert on one particular branch of maths that did something quite clumsily with like three-dimensional rotations. The quaternions did very, very simply.
Right.
And so that was a direct threat to him. And the Mad Hatter's Tea Party is a real satire about, in this theory at least, about quaternions.
Right. As I say, Alice is one of my favourite books. The scene with the dormouse in the teapot.
Yes.
You wouldn't think that the dormouse would fit in the teapot.
Right. I read up something on that, and apparently that's where dormice were kept as pets. I had no idea about that, but apparently they do. So,
were there any other scenes in Alice where the mathematics problems are obvious?
Well, there are a few very obvious ones, like when she just lands down the rabbit hole. That she recites the times tables and she gets them all completely wrong, and there's when she's talking with the mock turtle about his lessons.
Yes.
And they go from 10 hours to 9 hours, and they get the lessons because they get less.
Right. They were called lessons because they became less.
Exactly.
Yes.
And Alice asks, so on the 11th day it must have been a holiday, and then they don't take it any further. She asks what happened on the 12th day, and the Griffin just interrupts and changes the subject. Brilliant. And the baby that turned into a pig is that's an example of a topological transformation or deformation that you again, that's a new bit of math that was becoming prevalent about the same time.
Do you think the Reverend Dodgson knew he was doing it, putting these puzzles in, or was he just telling a story to a little girl?
It's a big question. I think that it makes sense that it is a math satire, at least in part, but at the same time it's a brilliant kids story, and it doesn't need to be about anything, and you can read it this way. You can read it as a thing about drugs if you like, or about sex. You can read it hundreds of different ways, and it doesn't change its value as a great story.
I've always been fascinated with the second book, which was Through the Looking Glass.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's moving from one dimension to another through a portal, basically, isn't it?
Yes. Everything's back to front.
And also I believe there's a chess problem in there.
Yes, and it's a weird one because apparently there's a really simple, like, 3-move solution to the problem that's posed, and the solution that Carroll is given, like, you don't move in order, like white moves 3 times in a row, and then it's just this, like, what? It's a crazy way of solving it.
Yeah. But he's I think he enjoys what he does. He enjoys telling the story.
Oh,
it's
sure,
obvious.
Yeah.
It's obvious.
And I don't think he would do it if he didn't. Like, he was a tutor and a mathematician. He was probably well, he was a clergyman as well.
Right.
He was fairly comfortably off, I'd have thought, and
Yeah.
he didn't need to be writing books to make a living.
So, are there any sort of other examples in the books or any other writings of the Reverend Dodgson that reflect his beliefs, mathematical or otherwise?
I'm not sure. You know, I've read up on Alice in Wonderland fairly recently, but I don't know about the other stuff. I remember reading when I was younger, like a set of maths puzzles that he'd set for
Right.
the magazine series that were really quite interesting. But it's 15 years since I read those, so I can't talk about them intelligently.
Sure. Okay, so you've got behind you there a couple of copies of your books, Basic Maths Practice Problems for Dummies and Basic Maths for Dummies.
That's right.
How did you come to write those?
I got lucky. My publishers Wiley came across my blog and said they were planning to do a series of maths books, and would I be interested in submitting a proposal? And I did, and they liked my style, and I ended up writing it. It was a real stroke of luck.
Right. And I was reading your bio that you worked with NASA.
That's right.
So that's a hell of an accolade.
Yes, I was working on a NASA project. I wasn't directly employed by NASA.
Right.
I was they run a project called Living with the Star, which is about the effect the sun has on the world and on space. So we were trying to figure out how and why solar flares happen, and we're still a long way from being able to forecast that, but
Right.
we've hopefully made some
And
progress while I was there.
And you've got a mathematical formula named after you?
Yes, that's related to that, the Beveridge-Lonkoff equation.
That's incredibly great, but incredibly nerdy.
Well, it is, and the way it came about was that my colleague was writing a paper that used this thing, and said, I keep having to write the equation 3 in Beveridge and Lonkoff. Can I just call it the Beveridge-Lonkoff equation? So, sure, go ahead.
Sure,
that's fine. And so yeah, if you search for the Beveridge-Lonkoff equation, it comes up.
Yeah, I must put a link to that on the video.
Sure.
Okay, anything else you can like to let people know about while we're here today?
Well, apart from the Dummies books, I've also
Right.
got a series of ebooks on A-level
Right,
maths.
and you're a teacher.
That's right. I
as
teach a classroom in Poole. I tutor mainly A-level maths and university level maths,
Right.
but also adult numeracy, which
And-
fits in with the books.
And I think that was always one of my failings at school, maths,
Um,
because
it's
we were taught,
quite a common thing.
taught logarithms,
Well,
which
that's,
people don't use now.
well, you do, but not in quite the same way
Hmm.
as we would have done when we were younger. Like,
We also had a
we have-
teacher that said, you never know when you're going to use them, but
Mm.
they've never turned up in my life.
Well, no, it's part of the problem with maths education in general, is that a lot of it is very abstract, and you teach this in case it ever comes up, and it really never does.
Never does.
And then when maths actually does come up, you feel like you've got a complete lack of confidence in it, because you've not used that maths and you haven't been able to do the hard stuff.
I think there's a lot of people like me then.
Oh, for sure. I was reading the other day that something like a third of people in Britain have rather basic
like
maths
a mental
skills.
block.
Well,
on
yeah, there's a lot of it about, and I think maths historically has been in places badly taught, and there's this kind of cultural maths is hard idea that we really need to break down and say, actually, no, it's not that hard, and it just, you have to think a bit, which it might be a bit uncomfortable. But
I sometimes feel that math is like music.
Very much.
You know, it's logical how notes follow each other.
Mm.
When you look at the music, it's logical how things follow.
Exactly.
It's the same with math.
Yeah.
You know, if 1 and 1 must equal 2 wherever you are.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Precisely, and yeah, if you've got 2 notes of a chord, the third note kind of follows. And sometimes it's implied, and sometimes it's a little way off, but that's when it gets interesting.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so people can buy your books from.
There's some here at Imagine Books in Weymouth.
Right.
If you come to flyingcolorsmaths.co.uk, you can buy them there as well.
Right, and if people want lessons with maths and things, come to the same place?
That's exactly right, yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the interview, and I'll let you
Thank you.
get away. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter.